Welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. We're those friends that you can take with you wherever you are on the path of infertility. Hey there, Springs in the Desert listeners. I'm Jillian, your podcast host. And today we're going to talk all about small groups. And I could not think of anyone better to talk to us about small groups than our first small group pilot facilitators. Meg and Bernadette are with us. I'm so glad to have you. And as a way of introduction, we have had Meg on before. We have not had Bernadette on before, and together they're just the dream team. So I just want to give them an opportunity to reintroduce themselves or introduce themselves for the first time. So Meg, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation to come and chat about what we've been doing here in Steubenville. So my name, as Jillian said, is Meg Reister, and I have been affiliated with Springs for the last, year and a half, perhaps. And just a real quick background is that my husband and I have one daughter. She is our only, and we do have secondary infertility. And I'm a teacher, and I just love everything that the ministry stands for.
Thanks, Meg. We're so glad to have you here. We'll make sure to link your other podcasts in our show notes because those were also incredible. So we'll do that. Bernadette, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Bernadette Giuliano. I've been married for a little over 6 years, and I started following Springs pretty quickly into our marriage. We moved up to Steubenville a couple years ago, and we're really hoping to build some community here. And so I was really excited we were able to launch small groups. But I have one child, but we went through primary infertility for almost 6 years before we had him. And also we lost a baby several years ago.
Thank you for just sharing both of your stories. I think it's just so beautiful that we can come together in a community and have different experiences, but still support each other along those various paths. And I think that is probably one of the reasons that small groups can be so helpful, because we're looking for community. Infertility can be isolating. And so I just want to ask, how did small groups come about for you two? And how did you connect? And where did this all start? I don't know who wants to begin, but whoever, you could just jump on in.
I guess I'll start because I was the one who reached out to Meg. I was signed up for a Springs newsletter I think back when it started. And I saw they were like, we're having these pilot small groups. Do we have any dioceses that would be interested in starting it? And I had zero affiliation with my diocese and I knew no one else going through infertility at the time. But I was like, it was just burning on my heart. I was like, I want to do that, which I was just hoping we'd actually be able to launch something. So I actually I reached out to our diocese. I reached out to Springs and was just trying to connect and find someone who could help me launch something. And I ended up seeing that Meg had written a blog post and she lived in Steubenville. And I was like, oh, I could use a second person. That would be a starting point because I know zero people going through this. And so I reached out to her and was like, hey, I had a bunch of ideas. Small groups is one of them. We also wanted to do a retreat and other things. And so I was like, hey, this is who I am. Do you want to meet up and talk about doing small groups and other stuff? I know that you're affiliated with Springs. And Meg responded very enthusiastically. And so, that's how we got initially started. And I guess to back up slightly, after going through infertility for several years, we previously lived in a larger area. And in that area, everything in the Catholic circles was either for couples with children or it was for single people. And so there had been this craving for community that could relate for a long time. My husband and I tried to launch something and then COVID hit, something just in general for people, a broader community, not just for families, not just for single people. COVID shot that down. So I'd had this longing for community that I could really relate to, was in a similar state of life. But I also had this fear of it failing because that's what happened back where we used to live, mostly thanks to COVID. But in general, there just weren't many people in our state of life who were interested in building the type of community that we were looking for. So Meg was like my crutch. I was like, if I could get at least one person, I would be less nervous about this just flopping. So that was how it started for me.
That is beautiful. And I love all of the honest commentary that you included in that, because I want to circle back to that a little bit later on in the episode. Things like fear and not having connections in a diocese, because I feel like that is some of the first obstacles to starting a small group. So we're definitely going to circle back to that. Meg, I want to hear a little bit about so backstory. I've had to relearn how to walk about 4 times in my life from various surgeries and just weird things. And so I love the idea of a crutch because I have used crutches so often, but they help. They're so helpful. You can't do it alone, but they really help you be able to gain this confidence to do it. And so I love that imagery. So Meg, what was it like for you to start this? And why do you think that small groups in particular, Bernadette talked about a few different ideas like a retreat, or what is it about small groups do you think that it can be helpful for a couple or a woman in infertility?
Oh my goodness. There's so much to share on that topic. So I'll try to be somewhat brief, but thinking back to last year when I received that email from Bernadette, it was like a gift from heaven. Because Bernadette said, it feels so isolating. It feels like you're the only one, especially in our town. And so receiving that message was just this like glimmer of hope. And like Bernadette and her husband, I also have been involved in various ministries and small groups and whatnot. So I felt like that aspect of like logistics, finding a place, coordinating schedules, like that's fine, but it's a whole different ballgame. Not that the other small groups aren't personal, but this is a whole other level, like just the topics and the sensitivity around it. And just, so I very strongly believe it's super helpful and beneficial to have the partner in crime, so to speak, or the crutch. But at the same time, I don't want that to dissuade anybody who might not be as fortunate or as blessed as we were to have each other on this path, right? And so it can be done on an individual basis. But anyways, going back to your question, what was it like in the sense of the benefits of the small group? We would be here all day if I try to list them all, but I guess like off the top of my head, actually yesterday I was thinking about some of these benefits as we were having a conversation with some of our members over text. And I came up with a quick little acronym just on the fly. And if you think of the word arise, not to get ahead of ourselves because that is what we covered in this small group. But if you think those 5 letters, affirm. So in this small group, we were able to affirm one another. We all come from different backgrounds. We all have different experiences, whether living with primary infertility versus secondary infertility and any other number of different factors that affect that experience. But we were able to come together and out of that place of respect, the R, we were able to affirm one another. And then the I kind of continued off of that, the individualized supports. So for some of us, and this is just more globally thinking about the small group and the dynamics, for some of us, and I put myself in this category, we're external processors. So we need to just let it all out and then we can move on with our week or continue versus others. Maybe that individualized support would be just knowing there's someone else on that path, very much like that eye-opening moment of receiving that email from Bernadette last year before we knew what this would become, even just that initial step of her reaching out. And then the S would be the support that I already touched upon. And then the E in ORI, thinking about our various experiences, which that was like the thread that kind of was interwoven, like all of us coming together and sharing. And you can share virtually, you can share over email, you can share in the grocery store bumping into someone, but to carve out that time, to dedicate time out of your schedule and to come together in that small group format takes it to the whole another level. So I hope that's helpful to think of it in the breakdown in terms of the ARISE acronym
Yes, this is why you guys God anointed you to be the pilot facilitators, because so many ideas and additions to what our dream of small groups has come from your guys' small group. And I just think that's just so beautiful that God took your first email, Bernadette, and just blossomed. And I just cannot wait to see what comes from that. And like you said, we do our first small group at Springs in the Desert is called Arise. We are currently working on our second small group, and we have a lot of ideas down the pipeline. We have many that have either come from Meg and Bernadette in your group, others who write for us and have helped us compile a list that I think will really speak to the heart of this path of infertility and all the various ways that we can not only come together, but be closer to Jesus, who has, for whatever reason, asked us to be in this season for his greater glory and for our sanctification. And however, though, I think now's a good time to circle back to some of those obstacles, because I think that's really, like you said, Bernadette, there's just so many feelings. fear. How do I even start? What do I do? If I don't know anyone, like Meg said, maybe there isn't even a single person I know who is in the same situation or a similar situation, even though we know they're around us, they're near. But I don't know anyone. I'm afraid to maybe ask my pastor. I don't know what to do. So I'm going to circle back to that. And maybe Bernadette, you could start with that and speaking just a little bit more into having someone like Meg and you said you found her. Is it right that you found her on our website, you said, in the blog?
Yep. Yeah. I saw that she said she was from Steubenville. I'm like, I know where that is. I live there.
That's amazing. And I would encourage too, anyone who's interested in leading a small group to reach out to Springs, because we have people all over the country and also in other countries. We now, I think, are in a handful of countries outside of the US, which is just so beautiful. And we've been able to connect people there as well and in various dioceses outside the US. But we do know people in many dioceses. Our team is spread out across the country as well. So we might have local connections that maybe aren't yet part of Springs, but we could connect you to a diocesan staff member or parish staff member. So definitely reach out. But if you have found someone or you know someone, like what were maybe some of the obstacles or some obstacles that someone could face in starting this small group? And did you guys talk to a pastor or what was that experience like for you?
Hey friends, it is your podcast host, Jillian. Just popping into this episode to ask you to consider supporting our podcast with a financial gift. This episode is brought to you by staff, volunteers who reviewed the content, and a professional editor. We would be so grateful for your financial support to keep this podcast sounding great and reaching more listeners who need a friend on the path of infertility. Thank you for your support.
So from my end, I actually started out talking to my pastor about these ideas I had about infertility stuff. He was super supportive, but it was clear in my parish we didn't really have many, if any, people going through this. So I was like talking to him. I was like, I'm going to talk to the diocese. I reached out to the diocese. They were super supportive, but they also didn't have a sense of who might be experiencing this. But what we did initially with the diocese actually was create a page on the website to at least get some information out there. It provided links and things like that, resources, but also just so that anyone looking for something in the diocese may stumble upon it, reach out to the diocese, and the diocese could connect them back to me. But the difficult part was connecting with individuals or couples who would directly benefit, because you can look around your parish and suspect, but you don't just go up to someone you don't know and be like, hey, I noticed you don't have kids either, and you look like you've been married a while. How's that? It's a very awkward, because it's a negative, not a positive. You see someone with five kids and you have a mom's group, you can be like, hey, you want to join my mom's group, versus like someone who has no children or just one child, and you're like, maybe they're going through infertility as well. So that was a challenge. So my thought process was, if I can at least connect with one person who's been here. So I grew up in Steubenville, but I'd been gone for 5-10 years. And I certainly didn't have connections in my demographic outside of my family and some of my older friends who've been here. So I was like, ooh, someone who's been here a while, has a lot of connections in the community. At least that's a starting point. And as Meg and I said from the beginning, at least there would be us. The two of us sitting down having coffee didn't sound like a bad way to spend a Saturday morning talking about the ARISE study. But yeah, it's the identifying people, networking and advertising. The diocese did help us with spreading the word, like through their newsletter and things like that, which goes to, I believe it's like schools and parishes, but we also put it in bulletins ourselves. But it's still a hurdle. We heard from some people who ended up joining us, but were like, yeah, someone saw it in the bulletin and recommended it to them. And they're like, I don't know if I feel like talking to strangers about this, which is fair. So that's a challenge, is getting to the right people and basically selling it in a way that they're willing to show up to the first meeting, which I will actually say we had hoped. My hope initially was to have a retreat first, so that people, maybe you sat at lunch with someone and now we're doing a small group, but we didn't have any resources basically. So a retreat was like down the line. So it's like, all right, well, I guess we're going to have to try small groups, and praise God, it did work out. But yeah, it was getting to the right people that was really difficult. And like Meg said, we live in an area that is beautiful. It has a lot of young families. People move here intentionally for the family, raise your family here, but that makes it in some ways extra painful for those of us going through infertility, and you feel a little bit extra hidden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for speaking into all of that, Bernadette. Before I jump in with some thoughts, Meg, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I just have maybe just a quick aside. We were very intentional in lifting this all up in prayer. And while we felt, I don't want to say the burden because that has a negative connotation, but like the task of trying to find people and recruit people, I just want to echo what Bernadette said. We were grateful that we could be an extra small group of just the two of us, if nothing else. But at the same time, it wasn't all on us. The Holy Spirit's going to lead the people who need to be there, and not to overly spiritualize. But I just want to share real quick an anecdotal story. While Bernadette and I were having a planning meeting, and I think that our small group member who this relates to would be okay with this because she already knows the story. But while we were meeting and having a planning meeting, and we were brainstorming different individuals we could reach out to and invite personally, because I think that's a big part of, we were very intentional in that it wasn't just a blanket flyer, or we had the flyer, we had the bulletin blurbs, but then we also intentionally reached out personally to invite individuals. And it was a situation of this, I know this one gal, she doesn't have children, she's been married for a few years, I don't want to assume, I don't want to overstep. And literally, as we were talking about this individual, her husband walked by. And this was like in the evening, like he shouldn't have been there. And it was just so, and we both got goosebumps. Remember, we were just sitting there, and that's the Holy Spirit. And so I reached out and I texted this individual, and she was at first on the fence, but then very much fully on board and participated. And so I'm not saying that every planning meeting is going to have a prospective small guy, but it was just so seemingly out of the blue. But don't underestimate the power of the Holy Spirit in bringing the people or the resources to you. You have to put in the work, obviously. But I would say for anybody who might be maybe feeling less than encouraged because the numbers might not be as high, or there might not be as much feedback or interest as you had hoped for, small and steady wins the race. Don't be discouraged. We ended up having, was it 6 or 7 ish? Yeah, and we were like 2 for sure, but maybe 4 or 5. So that even exceeded our expectations.
That is just so beautiful. I was getting goosebumps as you shared that, but it's so true. The Spirit is going to lead whoever needs to be there to be there. And I have been a part of ministry for almost my whole life, and I have seen groups that have 20, 30 people in it, and some that have just 2 or 3, and both having just beautiful, I think, consolation and community, and right, like whoever needs to be there will be there. God will provide that. But it is an obstacle. And I appreciate you saying that. Like, it is work. However, with your help and the feedback that you guys have given us, we have been able to formulate a process for all facilitators to receive some training on how to be facilitators. So if you've never led a small group before, that's okay. We're here to support you and help you. And although, yes, you have to say words and you have to maybe ask questions, we have a guide that leads you through it. We'll have a virtual training with either one or many of our team members. And Bernadette, I really like that you brought up many options, wanting to start with a retreat, but that maybe not working out. Part of our consultation will be to identify, okay, where is your parish at? Do they even have infertility support on their website? If not, we have an entire page dedicated to showing diocesan leaders how to do that, how to create it, what to put on there, links to include, so that you could start there. We have, like you said, bulletin blurbs and flyer templates that we can help you start to get the word out. But I just love this idea of coming together at a planning meeting and brainstorming who can we invite, because God is going to put those names on your heart, and maybe someone will walk by, right? But maybe a name will just be put on the heart of both leaders who are meeting. Or maybe it will just, God has to be consistent with me because I brush off the first and second time he's mentioning something. And so sometimes, okay, this is coming up over and over, and I need to invite this person. And I don't know what that invitation is about, but maybe they've been wanting to help with something, or maybe they are needing support, or it could be so many ideas that God could be putting that person on your heart for. So I definitely appreciate that. And I think it's also so beautiful that Bernadette not only was your pastor, but then the diocese was also really supportive and wanting to get that started. And while that might not always be the case for small group leaders, maybe their parish priest is feeling a little bit tapped out and having a lot of responsibilities, or maybe the diocese hasn't identified that as a need. Again, that's what we are here for. Springs is here to be able to start creating those connections, to send the emails, to connect with your diocesan leaders, to help that process and say, hey, you don't have, this isn't a project for you. We're putting a volunteer in your path who can get this started. And we just want you to help facilitate this so that those who are in your diocese can go to your page and see that you care about the season that they're experiencing. And we can show you exactly how to do that. And when they hear that, every diocese that we have worked with says, great, let's get that rolling. But it is usually an obstacle for them too, because everyone just has a lot going on and there's a lot on their plate. And if we can make it easier for them, that's what we want to do. Before we wrap up, I have so many questions I want to ask you all. So maybe we'll have to do a small groups part 2. But before we wrap up, maybe from each of you, I'll start with you, Bernadette. What was something from our small group study, Arise, that you thought was particularly helpful to those? Was there something in the format, or did you like the topic of Arise? And then secondly, if there would just be one piece of encouragement that you would give to a listener who's considering attending a small group or considering leading a small group, what would that be?
Okay. I really did the content of Arise and even just the title alone, because I think anyone who's gone through the darker days of infertility, whether they're sitting in them right now or that they've in a sense gotten over the hump, those diagnosis days or whatever it was, that was the darkest time, there is a real sense of we need to arise. We want to rise up. We want to be elevated despite the suffering that we still carry with us. And I loved just the positivity of the study. In a sense, it certainly wasn't light, but it, like many of the things that Springs does, is just a redirect to like, how can I thrive in this season with the grace the Lord has given me for this season? And in many ways, not even despite this season, like how has the Lord blessed me because of this, in a sense. And so I like that. I wouldn't say that there was like one session in particular that was like, wow, this one particularly resonates, but I felt like the questions were geared towards the discussion, drawing us closer to the Lord, closer to each other, and elevating our experience of infertility, because it's so easy to just get stuck in kind of those darker moments, which there's a time and a place to discuss those. And we certainly did. Sometimes you just need to vent to someone who really does understand, because they're literally walking the same path as you or a very similar one. But I really like that the study is striving to bring you up from those darker moments. Sorry, what was the second question?
The second question? That's okay. That's okay. What encouragement would you give to someone interested in small groups?
Number one, I would say if you are in a space where you're really struggling and you feel the need for the community, but you are not in a place to start it because of where you're at in your journey, that's okay. Don't force yourself. A few years ago, I was not in a place to use. I desperately needed it, but I was going through surgeries. I was miscarrying. I wasn't in a position to lead a small group, and that's okay. If it's on your heart that you want the community, but you're not mentally or spiritually in a space to do it, that's okay. Don't feel like you have to launch something. But if you do feel like you are, in a place in your own journey that you can, not that everything's better, but that you're at least have a grasp on it in a way that you're like, I can do this. I can facilitate my own ministry to myself as well as to other people. Be empowered by that. That's the Lord moving in your life. And don't be afraid to take that step to reach out. I just picked up the phone and called the diocese. Sometimes you just got to start somewhere. And that was empowering, even though honestly, they didn't have any specific connections for me. They just to experience the support was helpful for me to be like, okay, I really want to figure out how to do this, and emailing Springs. And you can take the first steps without knowing how it's going to turn out. And that's okay. But I would really encourage you, if you're feeling that I need this, I want this, and I think I have the capacity to help launch it, try. It doesn't hurt. In fact, it may turn into something really beautiful.
Thank you, Bernadette. How about you, Meg?
Oh, I love that ending, what Bernadette just said. Don't be afraid to take that first step and not knowing what it could turn into, because I think that's where we are right now. Like, we have taken that first step and we're just even more on fire for what might come next. But I think for me, there were so many takeaways, so many golden nuggets, if you will, from this study. But just generally reflecting back on it, I think I came away from it with a deeper appreciation for my marriage and a deeper desire in wanting to foster my relationship with my spouse. Not that every week the questions pointed towards I guess indirectly they did point to our marital relationship, but it's one thing to talk in small group with other women about our struggles and our shared challenges. And like Bernadette said, some of the blessings that we're trying to see in this unwanted or not chosen path. But it's another then to come home and unpack some of my feelings or some of the thoughts or some of the inspirations that came up for me as I sat with this material with my husband. And my husband's not a small group kind of guy, but it was really neat to be. So I say that because I don't know if he would ever do like a couple's small group or Bible study, but I was able to tailor it and do it informally with him through our conversations. And so I have a real deep appreciation for that, because I don't know that I would have brought up some of these topics or some of these feelings or questions that I was facing or answers that were coming to me in prayer through completing the study. So I'm really grateful for that. Just brings for reminding me of the need to foster and nurture that relationship aspect. And then the other piece, the encouragement, again, building off of my experience of having gone through this over the last year, I think it's almost like an oxymoron, but joyfully whole. And Bernadette knows a little bit about this because we were just recently talking about this. Joyfully whole as in WHOLE, like coming out of this, if you imagine all of us as pieces of the puzzle, like we have all these different aspects or parts to us, and infertility is a big part of that, right? But it's not the only part. And so sometimes it can feel like this gaping hole, HOLE, this wound, it's this all-consuming, sometimes lived experience that we face. And Bernadette was saying the dark times versus, I just love in the name Arise. Like, I know it was referencing like little girl, get up, like arise, daughter of God. But I also think of like the sunrise, like breaking over the horizon. And so thinking of letting the light in and just joyfully whole in the sense of embracing. And I know not everybody, whether someone's early on in this path, or even you can't put a timeline on it. Even if you've lived with this throughout your marriage for 20 years, there's still going to be dark moments and dark spots. It's a cross that we're always going to have. But just going back to the crutch idea, and I know, Jillian, we've talked about this before, just embracing that cross with everything we've got. So I think the encouragement would be, even though the topics are heavy, even though group dynamics might be challenging, as anything is with interpersonal relationships or groups, even though the unexpected may occur. Take that first step. You don't know how it's going to go. For those of us who are planners, again, I put myself in that category. That's really tough. And as I mentioned at the beginning, talking about it's one thing to lead a Bible study from the religious or like theological or the typical small group perspective, but it's another to lead a study on something that's so close and personal to the heart and so deeply connected to wounds and physical and emotional. And so, yeah, just don't be afraid to see what's out there, see what God has. Sometimes the best way to learn that is to go through it, even though we might be avoiding it and trying to stay off the path entirely. So even though it'll be hard, we're not saying it's a walk in the park, but just doing it in community, whether you are a lead facilitator solo or doing it with a partner or a team, meeting in community is just so beneficial because we're not made to be alone. We're made to be with others. So I would just, again, echo Bernadette's sentiments. Just start small. Take that first step. You never know where it's going to lead.
Ladies, thank you so much. I feel encouraged, and so I trust that the community will too. Listeners, if you are someone who would like to lead a small group, you've got questions about that, or you'd like to attend a small group, just reach out to us and we'll connect you with someone who can either help you facilitate or we can point you to, we've got many small groups who are going to be starting here soon. So if you are looking for that, we can definitely connect you to those as well. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining us for this Springs in the Desert podcast episode. We would be so grateful if you took a minute to rate and review us so that we can reach more listeners. Don't forget to check out our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and go to our website, springsinthedesert.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter and community prayer list, read our blog, and register for virtual and in-person events. Most importantly, remember that God loves you so much, and so do we.